Imagine you're in a meeting, right, and someone just slams their fist on the table to get their way.
Oh yeah, we've all seen that.
Right. It's awkward, and honestly, it's highly ineffective. But before we get into exactly why that kind of visible power is a massive liability today, welcome to Book Visionary.
Glad to be here.
If you enjoy our deep dives, please remember to subscribe, like, share, comment, and turn on the bell icon. It really helps the channel out. So, going back to that fist slamming example, we usually picture power as this loud, obvious thing.
Yeah, like an earthquake. Or, general shouting orders.
Exactly. We're conditioned to think it's just this straightforward application of visible force.
Because visible force is just, well, it's easy for us to understand. It's someone projecting, I am bigger than you, therefore you must do what I say.
It leaves no room for interpretation.
Right. But then you step into the real world. You walk into your office tomorrow,
Oh.
or you sit down for a negotiation. Suddenly, that overt force is entirely useless.
If you try to use it, you just look unhinged.
Exactly. Outright aggression in a civilized society usually just gets you fired or ostracized. So the game of power, it doesn't disappear.
It goes underground.
It becomes invisible. It transforms into this highly strategic psychological dance.
And that invisible dance is exactly what we are unpacking for you today. We're taking a deep dive into the unspoken social game of power, using excerpts from Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power.
It's such a fascinating source text.
It really is. Our mission here is to extract the hidden mechanics of this game. We want to understand how to navigate a world where subtle manipulation and psychological leverage are the true currencies.
To do that, we need to invite you, the listener, to change your perspective for a minute. Think about your daily life, your office politics, your friendships.
Imagine them as a chessboard.
Yes. Everyone around you is playing a game, whether they realize it or not.
But if life is a chessboard, you can't even play if you don't exist in the minds of the other players.
You have to actually be on the board.
Right. And the sources make a profound point about this. Everything in this world is judged by its appearance. What is unseen counts for absolutely nothing.
Which anchors what the text calls law 6. Court attention at all cost.
You just can't afford to get lost in the crowd.
Well, you can't.
Yeah.
But the nuance here is how you capture that attention. The most powerful players don't just shout louder than everyone else.
They use spectacle and mystery.
Precisely.
The story of P.T. Barnum in our sources illustrates this so brilliantly. Long before he was the circus icon, Barnum owned the American Museum of Curiosities in New York.
You needed to draw crowds, right?
Yeah, but traditional advertising was expensive, and people just ignored it. So he orchestrates this bizarre spectacle. He goes out onto the street and hires a beggar.
Just a random beggar.
Yeah, and he hands the man 5 ordinary bricks.
The instructions Barnum gives this guy are just wonderfully absurd.
They really are.
He tells the beggar to walk a very specific circuit around several city blocks, and he has to lay 1 brick down on the sidewalk at certain points.
But always keeping 1 brick in his hand.
Right. Then he walks the circuit again, replacing each brick on the street with the one he's holding.
And Barnum adds one crucial condition. The beggar has to remain completely serious and answer 0 questions.
He can't say a word to anyone.
Not a single word. And at the end of the circuit, he's supposed to walk into Barnum's museum, sneak out the back door, and do it all over again.
Which is just genius. Because by the 4th time this guy makes his circuit, there's a massive, bewildered crowd following him.
People are intensely debating what he's doing.
Is it a ritual? Is it a secret code? And every time he goes into the museum, dozens of people buy tickets just to follow him inside.
Just to see what he does next.
Exactly. Barnum created an irresistible magnet of attention without uttering a single word of promotion.
That silence acts as a vacuum. It just pulls people in. The sources also mention Mata Hari, the famous spy and exotic dancer.
Oh, her story is fascinating.
Her entire aura came from the fact that no one actually knew who she was or where she was from. She just wrapped herself in this veil of ambiguity.
Because mystery invites constant interpretation. Human beings are, we're problem-solving machines. We cannot stand an unsolved puzzle.
We have to figure it out.
Right. When you present yourself with a degree of mystery, people never tire of you. They can never fully grasp you.
As the text notes, what cannot be seized and consumed creates power.
But silence is incredibly hard to maintain when your intelligence is challenged.
Oh, for sure. Our modern instinct is to fight back. We want to prove our point with words.
But the sources argue that breaking your silence to argue is the most dangerous trap you can fall into, which leads to Law 9. Win through actions, never argument.
This is so hard to swallow because we're taught from a young age to debate, right? To persuade with logic.
To build a rational case. But the text argues that any triumph you think you've gained through argument is a Pyrrhic victory.
The resentment lasts way longer than the momentary change of opinion. I always compare this to debating someone on the internet.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
I mean, think about it. Have you ever seen anyone in the history of the internet read a perfectly logical, well-cited paragraph in a comment section and say, you know what, you're right, I'm completely abandoning my deeply held belief?
Never. Not once.
It never happens. Words just make people dig their heels in.
Because an argument inherently challenges someone's intelligence or their worldview. When you argue with a superior, you're essentially telling them they are defective in their reasoning.
There's a tragic story from 130 that captures this perfectly.
The Roman engineer, right?
Yeah. So this Roman military engineer gets an order from a consul named Mucianus. The consul wants the largest ship's mast in the armory sent to the front lines for a battering ram.
But the engineer knows the physics of this. He knows the smaller mast is actually much better suited for the task because of how it has to be maneuvered.
Right. So the engineer decides to argue. He draws diagrams. He explains the physics to the soldiers who came to get the mast.
And ultimately, he sends the smaller mast because he is objectively, scientifically correct.
And his reward for being scientifically right, the consul had him stripped naked and flogged to death.
It's brutal. But to the consul, this wasn't an engineering problem. It was an insubordination problem.
He didn't care about the laws of physics.
Not at all. He cared about his absolute authority. The logical argument was perceived as a direct threat to that authority.
Now contrast that fatal mistake with how Michelangelo handled a similar threat.
Oh, the David statue.
Yes, so he's sculpting his masterpiece, the statue of David, and his patron, the mayor of Florence, comes into the studio, looks up at this towering statue and says, "The nose is too big."
Even though Michelangelo knows the nose is geometrically perfect, the flaw is just an optical illusion from where the mayor is standing on the floor.
But Michelangelo doesn't argue. He doesn't pull out a ruler or explain forced perspective. He knows correcting the mayor verbally would humiliate him in front of his entourage.
So instead, he climbs up the scaffolding, and he secretly grabs a handful of marble dust.
He starts lightly tapping his chisel against the nose, but he's not actually altering the stone at all.
Right, he just lets the hidden dust fall to the ground, creating the illusion of work.
Then he calls down, "How is it now?" And the mayor smiles and says, "Ah, much better. You've brought it to life."
It's brilliant.
Wow.
Michelangelo demonstrated. He didn't explicate. He gave the mayor the visceral satisfaction of feeling influential without compromising the art.
Action bypasses those ego defense mechanisms that words always trigger. The takeaway for you is that you have to show the result to win people over.
You create a phantom edit, essentially. It allows the other person to keep your pride.
But I will say that level of constant vigilance, managing perception, stroking egos, biting your tongue, that requires an immense amount of energy.
Oh, absolutely. If you are always performing, you're going to burn out.
Which is why power can't just be about perception. It has to be structural.
You have to build leverage, and that requires a shift in how you operate, which brings us to Law 7. Get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit.
The text uses this really harsh jungle metaphor to explain it.
Yeah, the vulture and the hyena.
Right. There are creatures who hunt and kill, expending massive amounts of energy, like the hyenas.
And then there are the vultures. They conserve their forces, they circle above, waiting for the hard work to be done, and then they just swoop in.
The principle is to use the wisdom, knowledge, and physical labor of other people to further your own cause.
I know that sounds intense.
I have to admit, when I read this in the sources, I felt some serious pushback. My immediate thought was, isn't this just a manual for being a terrible, toxic, plagiarizing boss?
Well, on the surface, yes. It feels entirely amoral. But the premise of this deep dive is to view these circumstances objectively. We're analyzing how power conserves its own energy.
So it's about not burning yourself out.
Exactly. If you insist on doing all the legwork yourself just to maintain moral purity, you will exhaust yourself before you ever secure real influence.
Thomas Edison is framed as the ultimate vulture in this context, right?
He really was a master of this dynamic. Edison is remembered as this great solitary genius, but he frequently took credit for the exhausting, brilliant work of Nikola Tesla.
And dozens of other engineers in his lab.
Tesla was the romantic ideal of a brilliant worker, but Edison was the architect of a system of power.
The artist Peter Paul Rubens did the exact same thing. Late in his career, the demand for his paintings was just astronomical.
He couldn't physically paint fast enough.
Right. So he built a massive studio and hired specialized painters. One artist spent all day just painting robes, another exclusively painted backgrounds.
And Rubens would just step in at the very end.
Yeah, he'd paint the faces, hit the focal points, and then take the sole credit and the awe of his clients.
He scaled his genius. By utilizing the time and energy of others, he created this godlike aura of speed and efficiency.
And the danger of ignoring this law is severe. Look at Vasco Núñez de Balboa.
That story is brutal.
The sources detail how Balboa suffered incredible hardships. He's hacking his way through lethal jungles, battling disease, all to discover the Incan Empire.
He did all the heavy lifting.
All of it. But because he was so focused on the actual work, he didn't secure his political power base.
So Francisco Pizarro swoops in, takes control, steals the glory, and ultimately has Balboa beheaded.
The lesson is rough. Doing the work does not entitle you to the power.
It really doesn't. If you don't secure the leverage, someone else is going to harvest the fruits of your labor.
Which transitions perfectly into how you actually secure that leverage. Once you are using the energy of others, how do you make sure the people above you don't just, dispose of you when they're done?
That's Law 11. Learn to keep people dependent on you.
We are conditioned to believe that complete independence is the ultimate goal.
We all want to be so self-sufficient that we don't need anyone. But the text proposes that true independence is actually a myth.
Real power comes from intertwining your existence with the needs of your superiors. You have to become the spine of their operation.
If removing you causes the entire structure to collapse, you hold the leverage.
There is this incredible historical anecdote about King Louis XI of France that demonstrates this.
The astrologer story.
Yes. So the king had this astrologer he admired. But one day, the astrologer accurately predicted that a noblewoman of the court would die within 8 days.
And when she actually did, the king was terrified. He suspected the guy was dealing in dark magic.
So the king decides this man is too dangerous and has to be executed. He summons the astrologer to a high room in the castle.
He'd already instructed his guards to throw the man out the window the second the king gives a specific hand signal.
The astrologer walks into the room, totally unaware of the guards hiding in the shadows. But before giving the signal, the king decides to mock him one last time.
He says something like, "You claim to know the fate of others. Tell me, how long do you have to live?"
And the astrologer senses the trap immediately. His mind is racing, and he delivers the most brilliant answer imaginable. He looks the king in the eye and says, "I shall die exactly 3 days before your majesty."
Just a masterstroke. In a fraction of a second, the king's entire agenda is dismantled.
He doesn't give the signal.
Of course not. Instead, he protects this astrologer with his own life for years, giving him the best doctors and lavish care.
The astrologer didn't have an army. He didn't have a weapon. He just made the king believe his own survival was inextricably linked to the astrologer's survival.
You don't need outright force if the person above you believes their happiness or their wealth or their very life depends on you being around.
Okay, so you manage perception, you utilize the energy of others, and you build dependency. But how do you actually motivate people to act in your favor in the first place?
How do you get them to willingly do what you want?
Exactly. That brings us to the raw psychology of human motivation, highlighted in Law 13. When asking for help, appeal to people's self-interest, never to their mercy or gratitude.
It requires a cynical but arguably very accurate view of human nature. We like to think that if we do someone a favor, they'll naturally want to return out of gratitude.
But the text argues that gratitude is actually a psychological burden. I came up with an analogy for this while diving into the research.
Let's hear it.
Appealing to someone's mercy or gratitude is like throwing them a threadbare rope. It might hold for a second if they're feeling charitable, but it snaps under the first sign of repressure.
And appealing to their self-interest.
That's like weaving steel cable. It permanently binds your goals to their goals.
That makes total sense. When you beg for mercy or remind someone of a past favor, you're implicitly highlighting their current power and your current weakness,
And you're implying they owe you something.
which powerful people despise. Feeling indebted threatens their ego.
The story of Stefano di Poggio perfectly illustrates how lethal gratitude can be. Back in 14th century Italy, the powerful Poggio family was instrumental in helping this man named Castruccio Castracani become the ruler of Lucca.
They essentially handed him his throne.
They really did. Later on, some of the younger Poggio family members felt Castruccio wasn't rewarding them enough, so they started a rebellion.
But Stefano di Poggio was the oldest member of the clan, right?
Yeah, he was a peaceful guy and took no part in the rebellion. When Castruccio returned to the city with his army to crush the uprising, Stefano thought he could smooth things over.
So he goes to Castruccio, and he reminds him of the deep debts of gratitude he owes the Poggio family for bringing him to power.
He literally begs for mercy on behalf of his rebellious relatives.
And Castruccio plays it perfectly. He feigns relief, tells Stefano everything will be fine, and invites the entire family to the palace for a banquet to formally reach an agreement.
But the moment the family arrives, the doors are locked. Castruccio has them all imprisoned. A few days later, he executes every single one of them, including the peaceful Stefano.
Stefano's fatal error was appealing to the past. Reminding Castruccio of the debt didn't inspire mercy. It inspired rage.
It reminded the ruler that he wasn't entirely self-made.
Exactly. If you want to move people, you have to bypass their ego and uncover what will benefit them tomorrow, not what you did for them yesterday.
And sometimes what people want tomorrow isn't logical or rational at all. They just want an escape, which leads to one of the most fascinating psychological levers in the material. Law 32, play to fantasies.
Because the reality of daily life is often harsh and mundane. The text warns never to appeal to truth and reality unless you are prepared for the anger that comes from disenchantment.
People who can manufacture romance or conjure up fantasy become magnets for the masses. No one exploited this hunger better than George Salmanazar in the early 1700s.
Oh, this story is staggering.
It's wild. Salmanazar was a regular Frenchman with a very wild imagination. He travels to London and introduces himself as a native of the exotic, mysterious island of Formosa.
Which we know today is Taiwan.
Mhm.
But context is crucial here. The English elite at this time were living in the height of rigid, structured societal rules.
And they had almost zero factual knowledge of Asia.
So Salmanazar realizes he has a blank canvas, and he just invents an entire civilization out of thin air.
He creates a complex alphabet, a spoken language, and deeply bizarre cultural practices. He claimed the Formosans sacrificed 18,000 young boys a year to their gods.
He slept sitting rigidly upright in a chair every night.
And he ate raw meat heavily spiced with cardamom in front of these horrified, fascinated onlookers.
The intellectual elite of London absolutely devoured his act. They wined and dined him at the highest levels of society.
Oxford University actually hired him to teach the Formosan language to their missionaries.
A language that did not exist.
He even wrote a best-selling, highly detailed book about the history of the island. He kept the grift going for years.
It wasn't until after he died that his memoirs revealed he was a complete fraud.
But looking at the mechanics of this, why did it work? How were highly educated Oxford scholars so easily duped by a guy eating raw meat and babbling made-up words?
Because skepticism ruins the fun. Salmanazar offered them the thrill of the exotic. He played directly to their desperate desire for adventure and the unknown.
They don't want to scrutinize his story too closely.
No, because the fantasy he provided was vastly more enjoyable than their mundane reality.
If you combine these elements, the orchestrating of visual spectacle like Barnum and the playing to desperate fantasies like Salmanazar, you unlock the ultimate level of influence.
The material defines this in Law 27. Play on people's need to believe to create a cult-like following.
The author outlines a specific blueprint for exploiting this human vulnerability, basically transforming a group of people into fiercely loyal disciples.
There are 5 steps.
Right. It starts with step 1, keeping your promises vague, but delivering them with absolute fiery enthusiasm. You use cloudy concepts and grand titles. But when I read this, I wondered, shouldn't vagueness instantly make people skeptical?
You would think so.
Why doesn't a lack specific detail set off alarm bells?
The psychological mechanism at play here is projection. Vagueness acts as a blank canvas.
Okay, how so?
If you give concrete, specific details, you give people something to critique. You give their logical brain something to use hazy, enthusiastic language. Listeners will project their own specific desperate desires onto your words.
Ah, they hear exactly what they want to hear.
They fill in the blanks with their own fantasies.
Wow. Okay, so once you have them hooked on the vague promise, step 2 is warding off their lingering logic by emphasizing the visual and the sensual over the intellectual.
You dazzle them with symbols, grand settings, and spectacle.
Then step 3, you elevate the movement. You borrow the architecture of organized religion.
You establish strict rituals. You ask your followers to make sacrifices, whether that's financial, social, or physical.
You see this everywhere today. Think about modern, intense fitness brands or exclusive tech ecosystems. They have their own language, their own required daily rituals, and extreme sacrifices just to be part of the in-group.
It elevates the brand from a product to a sacred identity.
Step 4 is, as the movement grows, you must disguise your source of income. Your wealth needs to appear as a miraculous byproduct of the truth of your methods.
Not the result of draining your followers' bank accounts.
Exactly. And the final piece, step 5, is establishing an us versus them dynamic. You manufacture an outside enemy.
You make your followers feel like they are the enlightened inner circle, constantly under siege by a world that just doesn't understand them.
Nothing bonds a group tighter than a shared adversary.
It's a flawless recipe for building an empire of belief out of thin air.
As we pull all these threads together, the overarching theme of this deep dive becomes clear. Navigating the modern world of power is essentially fighting a civilized war.
It requires you to act like the perfect courtier.
And the perfect courtier never resorts to brute force. They meticulously mask their intentions, they orchestrate their appearances, and they study the psychological weaknesses of everyone around them.
They expertly pull the levers of self-interest and fantasy.
They lay the bricks silently in the street to draw a crowd. They tap the hidden marble dust to soothe an ego.
They weave the steel cable of mutual self-interest instead of begging for gratitude.
But before we wrap up today, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, lingering question to ponder. The source material states unequivocally that power is an amoral game.
It demands that you strip away the lens of good and evil and treat human interactions merely as a game of physics, leverage, and maneuverability.
But consider the psychological toll of playing that game. If you spend your entire life wearing these carefully crafted masks, if you never argue for what you genuinely believe because it might offend someone's ego,
if you're constantly mirroring others and manipulating their self-interest just to maneuver them on the chessboard,
what happens to your own identity?
it is the ultimate paradox of mastering this game. In your relentless effort to control everyone around you, you risk completely losing yourself.
Is true intimacy, genuine, uncalculated, vulnerable human connection the ultimate, unavoidable casualty of mastering the game of power?
It's a heavy question.
It really is. Think about that the next time you find yourself reaching for a mask. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.